His heart beat like a drum in the silence of the courtroom. The room was thick with tension. As Sergeant Ethan Mitchell, a grizzled 45-year-old veteran, sat in his wheelchair. His military uniform, now worn and weathered, was a reminder of countless battles fought. His eyes were fixed on the judge, but his mind was elsewhere, glued to the dog by his side. Jack, his loyal German shepherd, had been his lifeline on the battlefield and his anchor in the darkest moments of his life. But now, the army wanted him gone. Ethan's grip tightened on the leash, and his voice cracked. Could he lose Jack after all they had been through together? The thought of it felt like a betrayal, a cold, soul-crushing betrayal. Ethan's plea for Jack's life wasn't just a fight for a dog, but for his own survival. Stay tuned to find out just how far Ethan would go to keep his family intact, and the shocking twist that followed. What happened next in that courtroom could have changed everything. As Sergeant Ethan Mitchell sat there, his hand gripping the leash of his faithful companion, Jack, the weight of their shared history hung heavy in the air. Jack wasn't just a dog, he was a lifeline. On countless missions, in the darkest hours of battle, it was Jack who had pulled Ethan out of danger. It was Jack who had kept him grounded when the horrors of war were too much to face. The bond between them went beyond mere loyalty. It was a deep, unspoken understanding, a connection forged in the fires of war. Now, as the judge prepared to make a decision that would tear them apart, Ethan's mind raced. How could they take Jack away from him? The dog who had kept him alive on the battlefield, who had pulled him out of the depths of his own despair when he returned home, had become a symbol of hope. He couldn't lose him, not now. Ethan's voice shook as he spoke, but the desperation in his words was clear. The room fell silent, and every eye in the courtroom was on him, on Jack. There was no denying it. Their bond was something everyone could feel. But even as Ethan spoke, something else stirred in the air. Jack, usually calm and collected, was behaving differently. His ears were alert, his eyes fixed on the door. Was this just the stress of the moment, or was there something more? The tension in the room thickened, and Ethan could feel it. The dog was trying to tell them something, and then, without warning, the air in that courtroom shifted. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as Jack's behavior turned from calm to something darker, something urgent. The room, which had once been filled with the cold, sterile buzz of legal proceedings, suddenly felt heavy, dangerous. Jack's low growl cut through the silence, the sound vibrating in Ethan's bones. It wasn't the kind of growl that dogs make when they're annoyed or anxious. No, this was different. This was the kind of growl that sent a soldier's gut into overdrive, the kind that sent a warning through the blood straight to the heart. Ethan's hands trembled on the leash as Jack's eyes fixed on the door at the back of the courtroom. The crowd noticed too. Whispers spread, and murmurs of confusion turned to unease. Jack never acted this way. He wasn't one to bark at the slightest noise. He had always been so much more than just a dog. He was trained to detect threats, to sense what others couldn't see or feel. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he wheeled himself closer to the front. Jack wasn't just being a dog right now. He was trying to warn them, trying to save them all from something that no one else could sense. His growl deepened, and then, like a flash of lightning, Jack leapt into action. His body stiffened, his muscles taut with purpose, and his eyes locked on the door with a ferocity that shook Ethan to his core. He called out, desperate and shaking, "Jack, what is it?" Jack's bark echoed, louder and sharper than ever before. Something was coming, something bigger than all of them. And the courtroom, once a place of cold judgment, was now a battleground. Ethan could feel the shift. and he knew, nothing would ever be the same again. Every instinct in Ethan's body screamed that danger was close, too close. Jack's bark tore through the courtroom, sharp and frantic, each one growing more desperate than the last. Ethan's breath hitched as he wheeled forward, his gaze locked on the door, his heart racing. The crowd shifted nervously in their seats, whispers of confusion turning to panic. Jack's posture had changed completely, ears pinned, body rigid, growling like a predator on the hunt. Ethan had seen this before on the battlefield. He'd seen it when Jack sensed a hidden threat, a bomb buried in the dirt, an ambush waiting to strike. Jack wasn't just barking, he was warning them all, screaming that something terrible was about to unfold. His eyes never left the door, his growls deepening, vibrating the very air around them. The officers in the room shifted uneasily, unsure whether to act, but Ethan knew one thing for sure. This wasn't a drill. Jack didn't react like this unless there was something more. He leaned forward in his wheelchair, trying to steady his shaking hands. "We need to evacuate right now," he urged, his voice hoarse with urgency, but no one moved. Everyone was frozen, captivated by Jack's unwavering focus. The tension built, thick and suffocating. Jack's growls grew louder, shaking Ethan to his core, and then, in an instant, the tension shattered. The sound of a door creaking open filled the room, followed by a chilling silence. Jack's body coiled, eyes still locked on the hallway. The hairs on Ethan's neck stood up. Whatever Jack sensed, whatever was coming, was closer than anyone realized. And the clock was ticking. Just when Ethan thought the nightmare couldn't get any worse, the door creaked open, and everything changed. The moment that door cracked, every muscle in Ethan's body tensed. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end as a suffocating silence swept through the courtroom. Jack, still fixated on the opening, let out a low, menacing growl that seemed to vibrate in the very air around them. Ethan's grip tightened on the leash, his heart pounding against his ribs. Jack wasn't just alert now, he was primed for action, warning them of something no one else could see. The tension was unbearable, as if the entire room was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The officers, once confident in their control, now looked unsettled. One of them, a large man, reached for his weapon but hesitated, eyeing the door with growing unease. The crowd, too, shifted nervously, some leaning toward the exits, others frozen in place. Ethan knew Jack never reacted like this unless there was a real threat, something far beyond the ordinary. His voice cracked as he urged, "We need to move, now." But no one seemed to hear him. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway, slow and deliberate, like the ticking of a clock counting down to disaster. Jack's growl grew deeper, more guttural, as if urging them all to move. Then, as if sensing the worst, Jack lunged forward, his body tight with anticipation, his claws scraping the floor. The door swung fully open, revealing a tall, shadowy figure standing there, calm and composed, as if he were savoring the moment. Ethan's stomach churned. Whoever this man was, he wasn't here for any good reason. The fear in the room was palpable, but it wasn't just about a dog anymore. It was about survival. Jack had sensed it. And whatever was coming next, Ethan knew they wouldn't be ready. The moment the figure stepped forward, the air turned ice cold, and every instinct in Ethan's body screamed to run. The man's calm demeanor was the first sign that something was terribly wrong. As he took deliberate, measured steps toward the courtroom, Ethan's heart pounded harder in his chest. The stranger's face remained obscured by a hood, but his presence filled the room with a palpable sense of menace. Jack, still taut with tension, bared his teeth and growled with such intensity that even the officers shifted uneasily. This was no ordinary intruder. This man wasn't fazed by the armed officers or the highly trained dog standing between him and the crowd. Ethan's breath hitched as the stranger spoke, his voice a cold, emotionless whisper that sent chills crawling down Ethan's spine. "All I want is the dog," the man said, as though the request were the most natural thing in the world. Ethan's blood ran cold. How did this man know Jack's importance? The dog wasn't just any military asset, he was family, a part of Ethan's soul. But this stranger wasn't asking, he was demanding. The crowd's whispers grew louder, and panic began to spread like wildfire. The officers tensed, their hands hovering over their weapons, but no one moved. The stranger's eyes gleamed with something unsettling, a cold knowing. "You think you can stop me?" the man asked, his voice dripping with mockery. Ethan gripped the leash tighter, his jaw clenched. "You're not taking him," he said, his voice steady, unwavering. But as the stranger's smirk widened, Ethan felt a sickening certainty. It wasn't just Jack he wanted, it was everything Ethan had fought for. In that moment, it felt like the entire courtroom held its breath, waiting for the storm to break. Ethan's grip on Jack's leash tightened as the stranger's eerie smirk widened. The air in the courtroom grew thick with fear, a quiet anticipation hanging like smoke before a fire. The officers, once confident, now seemed unsure, their fingers twitching on the triggers of their weapons. Jack's growls had turned into a deep, primal rumble that reverberated through the floor beneath them, each sound a warning that no one could ignore. The stranger had come for Jack, and Ethan's resolve hardened. He was willing to fight for the dog who had saved his life, the dog who had given him a reason to keep going when everything else seemed lost. But the stranger was calm, too calm, as if he already knew what the outcome would be. His voice slid through the tension like ice. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. All I want is the dog." His words struck Ethan like a punch to the gut. This wasn't about a dog. It was about control, about taking what didn't belong to him. The crowd had gone eerily silent, 100 eyes fixed on the standoff between Ethan and the stranger. Jack's growl deepened, a warning that only Ethan understood. This wasn't a fight for a dog. This was a fight for everything Ethan had fought for, his life, his sanity, and his family. The tension snapped, and Ethan's voice rang out with a fierce determination. "You're not taking him. He's mine." The stranger's eyes flickered with irritation, but Ethan stood his ground unwavering. He would protect Jack at all costs. This story reminds us that true bonds, especially those built on shared hardship and loyalty, cannot be broken easily. The relationship between the veteran and his dog, Jack, shows how even in the face of unimaginable adversity, standing firm for what we love and value is essential. It teaches that sacrifice, resilience, and trust are the cornerstones of survival and hope. In life, whether it's defending loved ones, holding on to personal convictions, or protecting what we hold dear, the strength to persevere comes from deep, unshakable connections. And these are the relationships that truly define us.